Hi, everybody. Welcome to Gateway Office Hours. It is Friday, so I'm here with Carter and our guest Liz. And we're going to be talking about the new regs that came out this week and hopefully help you build your business like we do every week.
Yeah, we're at episode 40. I don't know if you know that.
Ooh, E40.
Right.
Do you even know who E40? Do you know who E40 is? Am I the only one who knows who E40? I know Wes knows who E40 is. All right. Anyways, Oakland. You don't even know that. Okay, moving on. Sorry.
I apologize to the audience already for this conversation and where it's going. All right,
you made me start with some weird intro video, and I couldn't hear what was going on, so it threw me off.
I know. We have to pipe it in so that we can hear. Did you tell anyone about like YouTube, any of that stuff?
Yeah. You're probably watching us on Facebook Live, hopefully right now. If you're not, we do this live every Friday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, or daylight time right now. And if you miss it, well, you're watching us on YouTube or hearing us on a podcast. How's that?
Those are the places.
Okay. Can we go forward now?
Sure. And they can bug us with the hashtag GatewayOH on Twitter to ask questions or post them on Facebook.
Sure. All right. On with the show.
Yes, on with the show. I actually did not read the news thing today. Do you guys want to talk about the news?
There's a lot of news going on. We are not a news show, Liz.
It's okay.
Sorry to make you suffer. Actually, you probably track the news better than we do. There's a lot of writing on the whiteboard over there, but I'm just going to kind of suffer through it. There's some interesting things happening all around the country, not just in California, which we spent most of the week reading through. Congressman Jeff Perry is putting together this movement to remove CBD from the Federal Register of or definition of marijuana, which is wise.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, do the obvious. Great, good job, guys. Keep doing the good thing at the government.
Yeah. Are you a little bit worried that once CBD is removed from the definition of marijuana, that it will be harder to argue that marijuana should be removed from Schedule 1?
Ooh.
Not to be the naysayer. I don't know, Liz, are you worried about that at all?
I would be worried. I'd like to see them both go at the same time, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is an interesting point.
Yeah, not to
but
be
a lot of the
blanket.
legislation around cannabis is derived from the cannabis plant. So can you actually remove it from the definition?
I don't know. You could.
Okay.
Yeah. Who
I
knows?
think it continues to imply that there's something bad about THC,
Right.
and that is just in the public mind something we've got to change. So.
Yeah, because my big concern is as soon as you remove CBD, the emotional impact of stuff like Charlotte's Web is no longer helping the movement. It's like, oh, we legalized that, so shut up.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and the effect of combining THC with CBD and the efficacy. I think that if you just disconnect the one, you're going to have ongoing problems. But
Yeah.
that's not what we really want to talk about today, right?
No.
Keep going with the news.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Business from the business side. Tribeca Investment Partners, who's apparently the largest hedge fund in the world. Luke, is that right?
Most successful, well-performed.
Is this according to their website, or are they actually
Top
the news source.
Okay, top performing hedge fund in the world is investing in the cannabis industry via an Australian company, Can Group.
Another fascinating name.
Yeah, that one's memorable as
The Can Group.
The Can Group. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's good signaling. And I think there was a recent news article actually that MedMen picked up someone from. Where did it come from? Goldman Sachs?
Oh, I think that's right.
So he wrote a big long article. Just I don't know. Further, it's good for everyone. I think just kind of legitimizing the industry and showing that
Absolutely,
it's really here to stay.
Yeah.
And then what's this last one here that I'm supposed to read? Colorado House of Reps voted 58-5 to approve a bill allowing cannabis businesses to reclassify recreational inventory as medical if federal enforcement policy changes.
Awesome.
So this is interesting. I mean, it's signaling that the states are just like,
You want us to call it medical? Fine.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah. You can do whatever you want up there in D.C., and we're going to keep operating the way we want to operate.
Cool.
I was there for the hearings on that. I think it's a pretty smart move on their part. They know that on a hair trigger, they want to protect the overall industry, and kudos to them for taking action early, for seeing a potential problem coming and saying, we're going to protect our industry at all costs. So.
Yeah, it's really, I don't often see that from legislators.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this might happen. Let's put in a protection now.
Well, you're seeing it in this year's reconciliation bill. We can get to that, but I think California is also being thoughtful about it in its own way, in the way they've structured some of the terms of the reconciliation bill. Whether it's not as overt as that one, but there are some reasons behind what they've done around licensing.
So wait, can we? Since we're getting to California,
Yeah.
Did I miss part of the show where you explained who Liz was? Or?
I was just about to do that because speaking of California,
I mean, because it's great that she's here telling us
So-
stuff, but no one knows. Maybe some people know who she is.
Yeah.
But we should tell people.
yeah,
Who's Liz?
This is a very organic show. Liz Conway, one of our mentors here at the program, with Guide LLC, and basically just top-notch strategic kind of guidance on how to influence. All this legislation that's going on and helping out cannabis companies in the local area. Are you working outside the Bay Area as well? It sounds like
we
you were
work
in Colorado.
throughout the state. We work in multiple states: Massachusetts, D.C., Illinois, California, Colorado, Washington. At this point,
Wow.
so we're touching a lot of points across state lines as well as in the local arena, and a little bit on the Hill.
So give us a little
Capitol
bit of
Hill.
your
So
background.
you're the person to
and-
call
yeah.
if I like, hey, I want this legislation changed before it becomes the law. This proposed legislation, it's like. You're the
We
person to
would
call.
love to get that call. We may not be the person, in which case we'd like to help you find the person, because
Okay.
I think there's a lot going on in the industry and we need to find the right people first. And that was much harder 2 years ago, but it's getting a lot easier now.
Cool. I didn't interrupted you. Sorry. What were you gonna?
No, I'm curious. Like, how did you get into this? What's your background? Like, tell us about kind of like what you've been doing over the last couple of years.
Sure. I was working for a Fortune 500 company, as were both of my partners, and we were running legislative initiatives across 46 of the 50 states and into local government, and really trying to sell technology to government is not the easiest thing. Legislators and regulators don't understand technology, and so helping them understand what it was they were purchasing, why it was important, the value to them was where we started. And we saw a need in emerging technology, kind of in the wake of a lot of the Uber scandals, the Airbnb scandals, to get ahead of what was happening. And founded Guide to help emerging technologies get ahead of a lot of what was happening. Because if you're an emerging company, you don't have maybe the bandwidth or the resources to hire a full-bore government affairs person or staff. And so we can kind of bridge that gap between having nothing and having a staff
that's
when you
cool.
grow. And, usually around Series C or D, people can in-house their government affairs. But until then, what are you going to do if there's legislation pending that's going to kill your business? There's a way to get ahead of it. So working for Bitcoin, drones, blockchain, and very soon after we started, Cannabis approached us and said, we need help too. And we said, well, that's kind of a good fit.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of killing businesses, after reading through some of this, there is some potential for that. So
Yeah.
it's very timely.
I didn't realize you started outside of cannabis, though. I like that. That's
We did.
Interesting.
Didn't most people? Well,
Yeah, but there's a founder from that I was an advisor to who was in one of your classes. I don't know if you remember, but she had a healthcare technology startup. Remember Kangaroo Health?
Kangaroo Health. Yeah.
And she got derailed because of legislative changes that prohibited her customers from paying her. Basically, she had to
Right.
get other people to pay, and that totally changed her business model and screwed her business over.
Yeah. Well, in big
But
business.
she didn't have a full-time person, and maybe it would have been nice to have a part-time,
Even
advocate.
3 to 5 hours a week can really help you get that early warning system. Like,
Yeah.
that's what I always say is get an early warning, because often if you're a small business, it's way too late by the time you grab hold of it. And big business is really well versed in being in the offices of Congress people and legislators and hearing about small technologies emerging. Let's get that law pulled out
Right,
and see how we
right.
can kill this really early,
Yeah.
because
This will be the one the one moment I'm going to let myself make a political comment, but like this is the problem with like massive regulations, is that they hurt small businesses and not big businesses, because they can afford to have people on staff full time protecting their interests, and the startup can't. And so they do exactly what you just said, which is they pay attention to something coming down the pipe, decide that it might hurt them, and make sure the regulations go their way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm seeing
It's
it
pretty bad.
really, really powerfully in the drone space and in the blockchain and in the Bitcoin space.
Yeah.
You know, they can get their messages proliferated very widely, very quickly. Messages of fear and intimidation. So,
Yeah.
Well, and we were talking about earlier, it's just there's so many small businesses out there right now that don't even know that the new draft regulations were released. And it's
Yeah.
like, if you're in an emerging market, you need to be on top of this stuff. And it may be 3 to 5 hours. If you can't even afford someone to consult with, that's on you. Like, you need to be spending that time every week, kind of like just keeping track of what's going on.
So on that note, let's talk about these draft regulations a little bit.
All right, yeah. Okay, so just going into like what is happening. So, can you give us just just an overview of like what regulations are out there, what's being proposed right now, like just kind of where are we at in this process of medical, recreational, et cetera? Because I think people are really confused. Like, we've heard of MRSA and BUMMR and all these crazy acronyms, and no one knows what they mean. Well, some people do. You do.
Yeah.
So kind of where are we at, and then we can talk about like what's happening on June 1st, 8th, and what are the other dates? 9th and 13th.
13th. Critical day is the 13th.
Okay.
So let me just take a step back. You know, California, since the mid-'90s, has had a voter-passed initiative to allow cannabis, medical cannabis. And it wasn't until 2015, though, that the legislature said, we're going to regulate this. We're going to pass a law that really addresses what's going on. And that was the MCRSA, the medical cannabis I'm going to mess that one up, MCRSA, and it's gone through a couple of name changes from MMRSA to MCRSA. Fast forward, then the voters in November of 2016 passed a recreational adult use. So all of the people, adults in California, can use cannabis, effective immediately then. It's just that there were no regulations that accompanied that, which is usual. Once you pass a law, you have the law in place, and then you have to have the regulatory framework come later. All of this has consecutive dates, which is January 1st of 2018. And the state has set up a regulatory board to regulate medical, and now they're faced with also having to regulate adult use. So let's just move forward. They've got their board. They've hired a staff, which, none of this moves very quickly. And they've been writing the regulations. You've got a lot of agencies involved: the Department of Consumer Affairs, the Department of Food and Agriculture, the Department of Public Health. And among those, they have to set up ways to come together. They've got big interests such as law enforcement, big agriculture, big pharma, having their voices represented in Sacramento. What happened in early April was that Governor Brown, issued what's called a reconciliation bill, and it's going to move forward as part of the budget to try and bring medical together with adult use, because everybody said, look, if you keep these separate, it's going to get very confusing for people. So let's try and reconcile the two. That bill is pending. Everyone should read it. You should know what it says, because a lot of it is going to give a preview for how you should be building your business right now. And that may pass, it may not pass. If it passes, it'll be part of the budget, but it's under negotiation right now. I think, though, a lot of people are getting confused between what are the rules set forth in the reconciliation bill, how do those change the MCRSA and the voter proposition, which you should understand. And then they're getting confused with what happened on Friday, which is that the Bureau of Cannabis Regulation, Medical Cannabis Regulation, issued its first regulations to address cultivation, manufacturing, and just general operations for the industry.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of us have been waiting for. Many people in the industry think, oh, the law passed, that's it. But that's because they're not really familiar with the California regulatory process, which is California is so huge, you pass a law, you don't put a lot of the little things into the law. You then have to pass the regulations that feed into that.
So what has come out last Friday is regulations to define the medical market.
Only, yes.
Okay, but because
They're
there's
still drafts, though. They're not.
they're drafts,
Right.
which we'll get to in a second with how to make comments and
Mm-hmm.
influence that, even if you don't have millions of dollars to throw at it. But there's this reconciliation bill that is on its heels that will then lend to how what has been released might affect the recreational market that will subsequently be delivered.
The recon bill will take areas of the MCRSA that they thought were great and align them with the Adult Use Act so that you don't have adult use rules being this way and medical rules being that way. There will always be some bifurcation because medicine is different than Coca-Cola, aspirin is different than Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
But they're trying to, as much as possible, align those two where there were major differences, and they could see that the industry was just going to clash, and regulators wouldn't know what was what. So that's aligning that.
So point being, like, if you have a business that you've aligned with the medical side and or the recreational side, and I have my own thoughts on how to address that anyways, but if that's what you're doing, this is important no matter what.
Both of these are really important. Don't get lost in one or the other. You need to be paying attention to both, making business decisions, and that's not always going to be easy because this law hasn't passed yet. These proposed regs haven't passed yet, but we're getting our first peek into how are they thinking about it and which way are they going to go.
Okay.
Do we have some examples of things that are in this that might affect businesses, just for people just to give them an idea? Because we're having a very abstract conversation.
Yeah. Let's talk about just the regs. How about that? Because we can spend a lot of time on the reconciliation bill another time.
That makes sense.
I mean, and I'm happy to weigh in on those as well. But I know that today the most important thing, and I think the place where, people, the Gateway mentor contingent cohort can really make the biggest difference is in reading the regs and moving forward. So here are some of the big things that we see, for example. And remember, this is only medical things such as additives and what can you add
I think that was at the top
cannabis
of our list too.
to, whether
Yeah.
you can have synthetics added or not added. What are the amounts you could carry in a delivery car? Do you are you allowed to have a bicycle, or, what are those specific rules?
Yeah.
So, for example, MCRSA says that people can take cannabis for medical reasons,
Right.
but now this says how you can and how you can't.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be very specific, when speaking of additives, right? There is language in here that specifically says, additives such as caffeine and nicotine, and so the question is like, and I know none of us have the answer. This is why you need to get involved and gain clarity. Is like, what defines an additive? Is it like, are we talking like powdery caffeine, or like what about naturally derived, like caffeine?
Well, I mean, if you look at Kiva's terabytes, right?
Right.
It's really the cannabis that's the additive. It's
Right.
a coffee bean with chocolate on it, and
Yeah.
they've added cannabis. It's not caffeine added to cannabis. It's cannabis added to
And
caffeine.
for anyone that's out there in the audience that's like, oh, well, I don't have coffee in my product, so I'm okay. Chocolate has caffeine also, so it's like, does that count? And like, what
Right.
level of caffeine, and what's an additive? So, things like this are super important. And then you were talking about, can you deliver on a bike? Well, they very clearly like set up the structure for, it has to be an automobile on a roadway. Like, there's a lot of stipulations about, like, it has to have an alarm system. There always has to be someone in the car if you're in a neighborhood, and it has to have a lockbox, and like all these different things. And then there's one particular clause that really kind of jumped out at me that's like could transform a lot of businesses and some of the bigger businesses in the industry, and that was you can't deliver medical cannabis and non-medical cannabis in the same vehicle. And it's like, I mean, I know that ease is probably big enough to where they're paying attention to this and they're going to be filing some comments.
Well, and even the requirement to always be with the car
Yeah.
means that you either pull up to someone's house and make them come out to get their medicine out of the car, which is
Which
weird
I think is
and feels like a
generally,
drug deal.
yeah.
But you can't do, you can't do the better customer service thing where you like stop and get out of the car and deliver unless you have twice the cost
Yeah.
because you have someone else sitting in the car with it, which
You can
is.
have a vehicle alarm.
Does that count? A vehicle alarm system counts? Oh, see, there we
Yeah.
go.
So, yeah, things like that. But let's go back because I think for the people who are watching this, I want them to know a clear path to what they can
Right.
do about it.
So-
Because,
so-
We're clearly
yeah.
confused about what the
yeah,
so
let's talk about what you can do about it.
So flash forward, you've read through all of this, and mind you, this is one title of I think 3 that have
Title 16.
This is Title 16. I know Luke was looking at Title 17. You find something that is just like, this is going to kill my business, or this is just wrong. Like, this is not how like medical cannabis should be treated. What do you do? I mean, there's like these dates, but like, do I pull together a bunch of resources and friends and get signatures? Like, I have no
It
clue.
feels very opaque to people who have not been
Yeah,
involved.
there
in
should
it.
be guidelines on how to do that.
Let's start with step 1.
Yep.
Step 1. There are three titles out there right now. There's going to be a 4th one that we believe addressing manufacturing today be issued.
Today.
You can go see these at cannabis.ca.gov.
Okay.
All of these are working. There was a dead link last weekend, but now they're all working to get to each of these. So, number 1, you have to read them. Don't trust your neighbors. Don't trust your coworkers. Go and read it.
Don't
And
trust
I'm
us.
looking at the camera because I mean you. You have to read it. There are typos in it. Those should be addressed. I can give you a prominent typo that I believe will affect some of us right now. And then the next step is you have until June 13th to submit comment. And you can submit verbal comment, you can submit written comment, but we strongly advise written comment. They have the way to do it listed on that same website, cannabis.ca.gov. They've got a series of public meetings they're going to be taking comment through. And I would encourage comment early and comment often. They are looking for the industry to say, what are your thoughts on this? Because you've got law enforcement that's weighing in. Again, you've got people from outside of California weighing in, and they need to hear from the industry. They've said that specifically over and over again because we're not behind their closed doors. This is the way that we walk into the room. When you comment, you need to be very specific and data-driven. That means that you are not saying, this is just great for my business if you would fix this provision. You need
This
to
is
tell
gonna
them
give me money.
why, and why from a public policy perspective. In other words, what you're thinking is misguided because it will cause safety issues, it will immediately cause health issues, it will immediately cause environmental issues. Those are the things government cares about.
Public health and safety.
Yeah. If you're commenting to say this is going to put my emerging small business out of business, you're already way behind. And while my heart goes out to you, and I'm sure their hearts go out to you, it doesn't matter if you pay billions in tax dollars to them, really. Maybe billions, millions. This substance is still so sensitive that they want to get the public safety, environmental concerns right first, and then they'll address growing the business. So
Right.
you have until June 13th to comment, and whenever you comment, you should get as many other people to make that comment too.
But individually, right?
Yep,
Okay.
which is why what you should do in addition to putting together comments is reach out to other people you know. If you are a juice maker and you don't like it that this can't go into juices anymore, reach out to every other juice maker who might care, make them aware of it, and have them say the same things, because that collective of voices, one compelling voice is not going to be enough. It has to have, 30,
You could
40 compelling
theoretically
voices.
pre-format a comment and send it out to your customers
You
and
can-
say, hey,
Yeah.
put your name on this and send it here.
Exactly. You can pre-format comments and say, pick one of these and say it.
Right.
Yeah.
Cut and paste these all and say it. So
Gotcha.
Can I tell you what happens after June 13th? Because a lot of
Please
people
do.
want to know, how can I build my business?
But before we
From
get to there,
Okay.
just because I listed a series of dates,
Yes.
right? And yes, you can submit via the online portal. How effective is going in person and making your voice heard? Like, should we, try to get everyone in the community at all these events? Like, is that effective or is that overwhelming to them? Like, I immediately saw this, like, I'm going to be at every one. I'm going to be at the stand and talking and like going through my list of things that I want heard. And then I'm going to submit it like through the portal. And, is that necessary?
I would say that at least go to one of them and make your voice heard, and then approach other people to go to others. I mean, if you go to every single one of them on the same issue, they may be like, yeah.
Yeah, we get it.
If you then write in and appear at one of them, that's great. But they're looking for a diversity of voices to
Yeah.
me. You going back and saying repeatedly the same thing
Sure.
get annoying. It's
Getting
like
someone else to say the same thing is great.
Getting
so,
someone
Luke,
else
what are you
to
doing
say
on
this.
June 1st? No, okay, so just to put it out there, and maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should just say go to the website, find out where these are. But okay, June 1st, Eureka, California. Wes, there you go. June 8th, Los Angeles. I was just down there this week. A lot of people down there. June 9th is Sacramento. That's driving distance. And then June 13th, San Jose, California. There you go.
they're doing a really good job of listening, and I think that's just use every opportunity.
Okay. So now we've gotten to June 13th. We've exhausted ourselves going to these public hearings. We've written our comments in. Is it a waiting game now?
So on June 13th, they take in the comments, and they divide the comments into major comments and minor comments. That's a little bit of a subjective.
I was going to say, how do I get into the major bucket?
It may be that major is the dominant voice, around this, needs more discussion. Like, they already know what are the real hot buttons.
If you send an e-check with your comments, does that?
No checks. You cannot send checks to me, please.
Bribing is a separate topic.
No.
These comments do not address Liz's feelings of how to
This
influence
is my
government.
comments, and this is an unrelated wad of cash, right? Yeah.
And please don't send cannabis to them. So the major comments will get another 45 days to review. The minor comments will only get 15 days for review, and then they'll be published. I think the publication timeline, don't quote me, but I think it's 105 days is from June 3rd. From Friday, when we'll know, kind of finally what this looks like.
I mean, relatively, that's pretty quick. Like,
It is, but if you're looking at a January 1st deadline and you're trying to make business decisions, it's August.
105 days isn't that?
no,
It's like
I'm just saying with 38 million people potentially commenting.
It's why to do it now. It's why to get them in and not be getting them in on June 12th. They're digesting these and putting them through their databases and considering
As they
them
come in.
now.
Okay.
I mean, I can't see how they wouldn't. They're not going to just twiddle their thumbs until
I'm just saying
the
that makes
12th.
sense, but it's government.
Yeah. No, I think that they have a protocol for ingesting them. California is not new to this regulatory type of rollout, and getting them in sooner rather than later is going to be great, because we all want answers so that by January 1st, we've got a lot more locked and loaded. What do the applications look like? What does ownership look like? How big of a cultivation can I have? Can my businesses be contiguous? Can I blend medical and recreational? And how will I do that?
Right.
Interesting. I've heard a lot of naysayers being like, "There's no way they're going to get anything out by January 1st." I'm kind of new to this whole political regulation implementation. What is your feeling about us having structure in place by January 1st or somewhere plus or minus 30 days?
Well, I think the great thing is we've had two major states, Washington and Colorado, to learn from. And while we're not taking everything, we can't. We're a very different state than they are. We've learned things like you can't license cultivation at the same time as dispensaries. You need some growing time. Otherwise you have empty dispensaries. That's no good. So they are really looking at the timing of those, I think, much more appropriately than if we had done this 3 years ago. What I will say to people who ask me, is this really going to happen on January 1st? Something's really going to happen.
Yeah.
But the especially the recreational rule just says that they must begin issuing licenses.
Right.
Begin means one license to me. Don't know who that's going to be. Would love to be first in line. It doesn't mean that everyone who's in is going to be in. So, that's why you got to get your operation tight and try and get early in line.
Yeah. So you bring up licenses, which I would say is there's multiple clauses in here, and it's not every clause. So take this for what it's worth. But there's a 180-day grace period once the regulations are put in place for compliance with some of the things. That being said, you should probably try to get all your ducks in a row early. But if you are applying for a license and you're anticipating applying for a license, there are very clear guidelines in these documents stating of what is going to make you an attractive applicant. So if you're just kind of holding off until licenses are available and then you're going to get your business in line, again, you're going to be behind the eight
Way
ball,
behind,
right?
yes.
So can you speak to that a little bit? What makes an attractive business to, and some of it's common sense, but I've learned in life that explicitly saying what is common sense is probably good sometimes.
No, I would take a combination of what the MCRSA has indicated they will require for licensing and ownership. That's going to be, a standard. I would look at the reconciliation bill, which is also talking about what will they require. I would look at these because the worst thing that can happen is you get a better case and you don't have to have these two pieces of paper. Yeah. But aren't you going to be way happier than starting then? And I've been through multiple of these licensing and permitting processes. They take weeks. It doesn't matter who you are. I don't care if you're Monsanto. It takes weeks.
Yeah,
So
and
start.
there's some nuances in here that will take you even longer, like getting the contact information for your investors. That's going to be more than just an email to your investors.
They're going to want to know why.
Yeah.
They're going to say,
What's-
what exactly does this mean? Does this mean me? Does it mean my wife? Does it mean my husband?
Is there clarity on if your investors are an institution, is it their investors that need to? This could be an infinitely recursive thing theoretically, right?
So they're definitely honing in on that. I would encourage you to read this because they've gotten more and more specific about what does ownership look like, what is required to have to disclose ownership versus what is required to have to actually be in the documents that go into the permitting process. And I should say, I think that these proposed regs are going to be the regs that recreational closely mirrors because they're on a very short timeline. They would rather go narrow, get it right, and then expand the adult use at some point. So if I was only gunning for the recreational arena, I'd read these as my roadmap until
this
those
would be
come
the
out.
template that you would expect them to be based
Yeah.
on. Yeah.
And look, there are some great recommendations in here. When you make your comments, if there are things you love, you should say that too, because there are going to be people saying, all they're going to hear is don't. And if one of those things gets a don't do this, but that's something you love, they want to hear that that's a great thing that you're doing, and this is why. So I would suggest don't stop just at the I hate this and this and this and this. The final thing I'll say when you comment, I didn't say this before, red line. Don't just say I hate this and this is why. Give them a recommended, I think you mean this. Show them the red line just like you would. If you look at the, caffeine additive provision, the last sentence says prohibited activities include but are not limited to nicotine and caffeine. The word activities should be
That's not the right
additives.
word. Right, yeah.
You specifically want that word to say additives because it telegraphs back to the first sentence
Additives.
that they're prohibiting additives. But if it's
Although
an
if it says activity, then maybe it's so vague that it can't be enforced.
well, how many years is it going to take you to get that
I'm
through
kidding.
the
I'm
judiciary?
kidding.
Yeah, no, I know. But you are bringing up a great point, which is a lot of people, especially in this industry, think, oh, I'll take the legal path to
We're used to- we're used to
arguing
loopholes.
myself out of a loophole.
Right.
These regs are going to close a lot of those loopholes.
Right, and you would lose that in front of a judge because they would say,
Probably.
obviously they meant additives.
Well, and a conservative judge might not. You might not lose it. A conservative
No.
might take a pretty strict reading and say, no, that's an activity. That's everything. You don't want to
Right.
leave it up to the
Yeah.
judiciary. Let's get it right this time. And that's what the BMCR is looking for us to do is let's help us get it right this time.
So speaking of getting it right the first time, some of the states to the north have been through kind of multiple iterations of their legislation.
And regs.
And regs. And so, I mean, is that going to be a similar process in California? You talk about expanding the recreational as we set the medical in place, but what's California's history with kind of evolving legislation like this?
We're a pretty dynamic state,
Yeah.
and we're really, really big. And it'll keep evolving, but I know if you look at some of the other states that have done this, they get a pretty hard push to just leave it alone, let the market run with it for a little while. So if there's something you
See
really
what
hate
happens.
about this, you may have to wait a while. That's
Yeah.
why it's so easy right now to be heads down in, I've just got to do my technology, I've just got to do my development, I've just got to get my permit. And that may be a useless piece of technology, a useless piece of paper on that permit if these aren't reasonably in your favor. So.
Yeah.
Are there any other, so we've talked about kind of the official channel to go through, you're going to comment, you're going to maybe show up at a meeting or write something. Is there anything else that people should be doing in addition to that?
Well, I mean, there are the expensive routes.
What are the expensive routes? Other than bribes, which, again, separate show.
No. No, I mean, always joining an association that aligns with your values will help. It's a little bit short to get active enough and heard enough through an association right now with these, but at least throwing your weight behind it if you wanted to join an association. And there are a couple of the big ones out there that are definitely making the rounds on this. You may not get your specific voice heard, though, from an association. The very expensive route is to activate and start through a lobbyist working up and down Sacramento, working your local lobbyist to make calls, and you still have a pretty short timeline on that.
Do you guys do lobbying as well? Or no?
So we're a public affairs firm. What we do is, because so many of these require lobbying efforts in multiple states, we manage the lobbyists.
Okay.
We make sure everyone has the same message about the businesses. And while I am a registered lobbyist in places where it's required, that's really not our business model. Ours is to make sure that that strategy is deployed without hitch across multiple markets.
Right.
So I'm in Sacramento all the time speaking on behalf of our clients and making sure that these messages are crafted clearly, they're redlined clearly, the messages are as encompassing of as many different groups as possible, because I don't want such a narrow message that people are going to attack us.
Right, right.
But
That makes sense.
that's where we sit.
And so, it may be too late to kind of try and employ a lobbyist at this point, but if there's someone out there who's already kind of lobbying, maybe it might not be too late to quickly build a relationship
Exactly.
with them.
That's
Say, hey, while
my
you're talking
point.
to these people, go say this.
That's
Right.
exactly my point. And, if you're a bigger company and you're out there in Sacramento talking to a lot of people, you may want to bring in a couple of really responsible voices because, the industry wants to hear from us. At the same time, they're giving us a really clear path through comment. But, yeah, if you can ride the coattails of a bigger dog, that for a startup is really good. And I would also encourage I know there's a lot of chatter in here about or in the industry right now, about how this is encouraging the big players and not the small players. We see this everywhere. We see it in who's building drones, who's building banking, who's building the various technology solutions for healthcare. What we're also looking for is inserting in these pathways to success for smaller businesses, because that's kind of as good as it's going to get.
Is that something that, you talked about things that the legislatures or the regulators want to hear in terms of public health and safety issues? Do they care about, hey, this is something that's going to hurt all small businesses across the board and only enable larger?
I think they care about it, but they need to see how it could be written. So to just say this is going to kill small business doesn't help them. They say, well, we need to foster industry. Show us how you can have a ramp to becoming your own large business. And bridging that gap for them is going to be important. They're not going to go backward on encouraging this to become a very large business. They will lose that fight. We will all lose that fight. The best we can do is create great small businesses that are very responsible and partnered with government, and ensure that if there are things that perhaps some of the labor provisions in here are deal breakers for small business, how can we move the dial so that small businesses still have a ramp into entry, Right. So one of the labor provisions coming through the recon bill is that everyone with 20 or more employees has to have a labor peace agreement available. Why don't we move the dial to where it's 75 or more employees? Right. I mean, it's going to be hard to win on that, but while you're building a small business, maybe you all know, like, my threshold would be 75. Right. You can even insert provisions such as if it's in a rural area, it's this size. If it's in an urban area, if that makes a difference. But they don't know where those levers are. So
that makes sense.
Not to get into labor, because I certainly don't want to go there.
No,
does everyone know where they can go to read these regs and to keep looking as they're being published and as new iterations? Cannabis.ca.gov.
Cannabis.ca.gov.
All right. So
we'll put a link in the show notes.
Some of you guys, we have questions from the band of rebels that are hanging out over there.
Liz.
Hi.
When it comes to public comments, what type of argument actually can help sway? Is it just volume? Is it the type of argument you're making? Is it the type of solution you're providing? What actually is effective?
I think that you need to look at what appeals to government in terms of public safety, public health, and any data you can provide them on the dangers or the benefits of how the different way that this is written might be. So for example, I really want this sentence written this way because I think the sentence was wrong is one reason. I think you have a typo here and it should be written this way. Or I think it should be written this way because in the interest of public safety, we've seen that this is how it's the best way to do it.
How do you deal with something though that's just arbitrary? Like mixing caffeine and cannabis is not allowed. Like, well, that's just an arbitrary thing. There's no data to support that that's a problem. It's completely arbitrary claim, but there's also maybe not a lot of data to support that it's good. So what do you do if you're in that situation where it's just some arbitrary rule that...
I don't want to answer for you, but like...
No, that's fine.
Sorry.
If you know the answer, go ahead.
Well, I'm just thinking, like, everyone's trying to compare the cannabis industry to something else at some point. And in this case, we're talking about medical. So, like, think of medical comps, right? Like, Excedrin has caffeine in it. Like, why is caffeine and NAIDs, like, not banned, right? Like, if that's the thing, like, and I don't know. There's just no medical proof that cannabis and caffeine shouldn't be mixed. Like,
So is that the argument then? Liz?
So that's where I think aligning with a couple of people who are perhaps producing, cannabis combined with caffeine might give you some insights. Like, what are they hearing about? What are the reasons that this would be banned? Has this come up in any other states? You could look to that. You can also say in Colorado, in Oregon, in Washington, none of them prohibits combining these two substances. And if there are any, I know what you're saying, there are no studies out there that,
Right.
cite efficacy or non-efficacy. So that's a harder thread to pull on, but not impossible. And you just have to argue the value and like that this is a mystery why you would do this. I also would say, don't just vomit into the BMCR tool.
yeah.
Make your points
Be pragmatic.
and make them, in a linear, very crystal clear way. They're going to get a lot of what I call barf into the tool from a movement,
Yeah.
not from a measured industry. And so try to bifurcate those two. And also, as much as you can, take your heart about your passion, and of course that can be in there, but it can't be your lead
Right.
thing.
So you like clear, concise, bullet pointed even. Like,
Yeah.
these are the-
Well, I mean, thinking about how many comments they have to pour through, and like the minute they start feeling like it's emotionally driven, like
their eyes are going to glaze over.
it's just like, all right, next.
Also, the minute they feel like it's from the movement.
Right. So pull your emotion out of it, just plainly said, and be pragmatic and practical about your comments.
Yeah. I know that's not a lot of help, but that's where I would start. Okay.
You spoke a bit about early warning systems that entrepreneurs and startups could engage in. Beyond keeping abreast of the regulations on cannabis.ca.gov, how do we engage with limited budget lobbyists and people like yourself in public affairs? How do we do that on a limited budget?
Mm-hmm. So, you can get some people, usually not lobbyists, they go on very big retainers for months on end. That's tougher. I would start by becoming active in signing up for every newsletter you possibly can that, you can get for free. California Normal publishes a newsletter every couple of weeks, and it's great. They link you to everything that's happened. They often will publish news in between times, and it's almost nothing to join them. They are such a great, long-term service to this industry. Also, Gateway is plugging you in. For other people out there, though, going to those websites and signing up for every update. The CalNormal Facebook is also really good. That's the best early warning system. What I find is that many people, it becomes white noise. I probably spend 2 to 3 hours reading everything I can across the country on this every day, and then time on the weekends. And by that, I can pull out those early warning, this looks like it's going down. And I do that for 4 industries right now, so.
Well, and as the industry develops, and we have Wes in the room as well, these organizations that represent your vertical are starting to form in the industry. So we have a distribution alliance, we have Cal Growers Association, obviously. There's a delivery group based in San Francisco. I don't know. After this conversation, I have a feeling that there's going to be a small business organization forming.
Yeah.
So just,
There are manufacturers groups, and again, right now there's a lot of noise, but I would read through all the noise because in that noise there's that alert of, oh wow, that I care a lot about. So.
Yeah, and I'm not going to get into specifics, but I have read through this, and wherever you sit in the, value chain of cannabis, you are affected by these regulations, and there
Yes.
are pretty glaring clauses no matter which vertical you're in.
Yeah, and some of them are mistakes. They're just like they were writing this very fast, and they're mistakes, and we can catch them, and they love that to help us out here. So.
Any other questions?
How does California stand up to the other states that you're involved in?
Well, it's much bigger? It's hard to tell because it's still so early, but that's a great question. California historically has said we're going to do our own thing because we're not like anyone else. And yet, I think that they are learning from some of those
Until they do
other
it,
states.
and then it starts getting rolled out into other states, right? It's like, a lot of times people say that California is a model that people are waiting to see.
Yeah, I also think they're doing some different things around agriculture just because we are the breadbasket. They know how much of this can grow in a state that can grow and grow and grow and grow crops versus other states that have a season where things are not going to grow outdoors as much. And plus, we're just territorially so much bigger. So it's different. I will also say my observation is that because we've had this quasi-legal industry for so long unregulated, that there are a lot of people who kind of take umbrage with like, well, what do you mean I have to do it your way? When Colorado and Washington they went pretty fast and people were like, okay, we'll do it your way. Now I think there's still this sense of, the regs, whatever.
We've been
And
doing
we've
it
gotta-
our way for a while.
We've been doing it our way for so long. Everybody's got to step in line.
Makes sense. Anything else back there, guys? Are we good? Chris?
We love questions.
So you mentioned how with regulations like this, medical, for example, may be a blueprint for the adult rec regulations. If we optimistically can hope for a federal decriminalization, will that same process apply? Will they look at state regulations as blueprints for a federal regulatory system?
That's such an interesting question. I think they probably would. I think that, and I do think that many of these regs are best practices for public health and safety. And you see reflected in the regs things that they've done around other substances, alcohol, tobacco. So there is a lot of continuity among those that I don't think are going to be big surprises. What I would keep my eyes on right now for everyone are the provisions in the reconciliation bill that are attempting to divide the industry with very bright lines. This comes back to something we talked about in the very beginning. How is Colorado protecting its industry? California is trying to protect its industry by creating very bright lines between medical and recreational. And that's because if the feds come in, we want to make sure that everybody knows which is which. If you've got both things in one truck, that whole truck is going down to be seized. If you have a medical-only truck, out for delivery or transport, arguably the state can keep the feds' hands off of it. So just keep your eyes on that, because I think what it's going to cause is a lot of people to have to carry dual licenses separated by premises. And
But that also then could be positive for small businesses or for unfriendly federal government policy.
it could be, it has, I think, many positives, but it's very expensive if you have to carry two machinery types, two fleets of, trucks, two farms, whereas you thought you could just have one.
Two safes within the same car.
Two safes
Maybe.
within yeah. We'll see how it plays out. But just keep your eyes on that. There are positives and negatives. So.
Is there anything else that we should know before we conclude? Any other final messages to people?
I'm going to hit the highlights. Read it. Don't rely on your neighbor. Go to cannabis.ca.gov and read it again. And just when you thought you've read it enough, read it again. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming today.
Sure.
It was a pleasure to have you.
Absolutely.
We'll probably have to do another one about the reconciliation, and perhaps another one celebrating the final version of this at some point.
Yeah.
I just hope I can done reading it all by June 13th. That's what I'm more worried about.
Well, I see that you do the same thing I do, which is I have a highlighter that covers what I think are dominantly the cultivators. The green applies to cultivators, the yellow to manufacturers, the purple to the other lines of business if they cross.
You're giving me more credit.
That's what your page looks like. When I look at his
he lost
pages of
his pink
paper.
highlighter in
Oh,
his
you just lost your pink highlighter.
No. There was a rhyme or reason. It was more, this is defining, and then this is worrisome.
I see.
And then blue was when I lost my yellow highlighter.
Fair.
Got it.
Well, thanks again. Thanks everyone for watching. We return next week at 10 a.m. every Friday on Facebook. You can catch us on YouTube. You can catch us on iTunes. I don't know where else, anywhere else.
Everywhere.
Forgetting whatever. We do broadcast from Gateway Works if you want a
We have
discount.
some private offices available, I heard.
Oh yeah, we have private offices available now from Gateway Works. So if you want a discount or just want to come check out the space, mention the show, and Michael will give you some kind of discount for the first month. I don't know what it is, and
We just work here.
yeah, come check us out in Jack London Square in downtown Oakland, and we'll see you all next week. Thanks.
Bye-bye. All right.
Thank you.